another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, October 7th, and as you can imagine, we have an incredibly packed and really good show for you guys. We'll start with, obviously, the biggest news from this past weekend. Alabama goes down at Vanderbilt. Huge game for the Commodores. Definitely one that I want to break down first. Then we'll get to all the other upsets, because there were plenty of others. Tennessee falls to Arkansas. Michigan falls to Washington, which is an upset or not, depending on the way you look at it. And then USC falls on the road to Minnesota. Then we'll get into what should have been the biggest story of the entire day. A&M just rolls Mizzou at home. Huge win for them and definitely puts them in the title odds. We'll also talk about that Miami game. Definitely escaped for a second week in a row, and the refs are at the very center of it. Then we'll get into all the other big results from the weekend. We'll get into Oregon's big win. Ole Miss bounced back in a big-time way. SMU got a huge win, so we'll break all those down. And then we'll finish it off with all the other news from around the country. We'll get into Penn State's win. Clemson kind of going in a little bit sleepwalking to a win against Florida State, and a number of others that I want to break down for you guys today. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use that super chat that you have at the bottom of the chat at the Sports Network channel. Just click on that at any question, any comment you like, and it'll pop up on the screen and we can have a fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be as interactive as possible, so utilize that as you see fit. Also, gsmcpodcast.net is still up and running and does the exact same thing. So either of those that you like to use, you're more than welcome to, but let's get into this, because it didn't feel real. I'll be totally honest with you guys. There were multiple points in this game where I felt like, okay, Vandy's doing a really cool thing here, and at some point, it's going to fall off. At some point, they're going to meet their maker, and Alabama's going to be able to take the lead, and frankly, there were a number of moments where that very well could have happened. But Vanderbilt just kept responding. It was absolutely incredible from this team, and obviously, when you talk about this team right now, it all starts with Diego Pavia. What he has done for this program is absolutely different than pretty much anyone else in the entire country. I've tried to break down who are the most important transfers around this time of year. It's him and Cam Ward. There is no one else that has transformed not only the team in 2024, but possibly the program going forward, more than Cam Ward at Miami and more than especially Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt. He has changed the entire way we look at this program. We look at this school, we look at this team, and he's got them in a place where they can walk onto a field with Alabama and not look afraid. There were a number of years in the past where the game was over the second Alabama walked off the bus. That was not remotely the case in this one. Vanderbilt never looked scared, and that was probably the biggest thing that got them this win, was they just never shied away from this moment. And I think the biggest thing is these fans. I mean, you have to feel incredibly happy for these people that have poured a lot of energy into a program that, let's just be honest, has been a little bit of a laughingstock for quite some time. They found a way to be on the top of the mountaintop. They were the story of college football, and we got to see what that fan base looks like. Because everyone talks about, Alabama's fan base and Georgia's fan base and Texas' fan base, and I get that. They're incredible, don't get me wrong. This one is as special as pretty much anyone in any of the fan bases in the entire country. We just don't get to see it all that often. And it's the reality of college football. We learned it all across the country this past weekend. Everywhere cares about the sport incredibly, and one of the big-time things that we get to see pretty much every year is one or two get to be put on huge display in one weekend, and this weekend it was Vanderbilt, and it was really, really special to watch. So couldn't be happier for that fan base. I think for that coaching staff, you got to feel really, really good with the way you guys played. Obviously, defensively, you didn't do too much. The Bama team was very, very efficient offensively, did a ton of stuff, but they did enough defensively. They got 2 turnovers in big-time moments that I wouldn't necessarily say are Jalen Milroe's fault, but you force mistakes from him, which is absolutely huge for them. As for Bama, this is the least prepared Alabama team that I have ever seen. And part of that goes with Vanderbilt just being incredibly good on the offensive side of the ball. So it's not all on Alabama. I don't want to put it all on Alabama. But this team did not show up the way that they should have. They were very undisciplined. They looked soft at the point of attack. And more than anything, they looked lost for a lot of this game. And there was a number of different places where you looked, and if they didn't have the helmets if they didn't have the logo on their helmets, you'd very well think that roles were flipped. You'd very well think that this was just a good matchup between two really good teams in the sport, and that's not the way that it was treated by any means, at least by Alabama. And then you got a number of things to take away from this. I think the offensive game plan was absolutely incredible from Vanderbilt. It's hard to really find a better one from across the country in this entire year, but Diego Pavia just executed at a ridiculously high level. So much of what Vanderbilt does offensively predicates on him just making the right decision. There's so much triple option look, there's so much read option, there's so many things that just say, you make the right decision, we will live with whatever decision you make. And he made every right decision. They were absolutely incredible. 12 for 18 on third down, had the ball for 42 minutes in this game, and won the turnover battle 2-0. That's pretty much the formula for winning a game that you're not supposed to win, and Vanderbilt did exactly that. It was really incredible to watch this team go to work, and they never flinched. The entire time, they never flinched, even with Alabama came back to under 5 points, got back to only down 2 points, or got back to only down 5 points with the ball. Vanderbilt just kept responding. It was absolutely remarkable. And then, obviously, the goalpost got deposited in the Cumberland River, and here's the thing about that. They're 3 miles from the Vanderbilt Stadium. That is not a normal thing to do. It is not normal for you to carry an entire goalpost that far. When you usually see those deposited into rivers, it's a little bit closer than 3 miles. They walked all the way through downtown Nashville to get there. It was incredible. The scenes from that place were absolutely awesome. If you're on a bachelorette party there, you probably weren't too happy with how the things went down this past weekend, but everyone else was. It was absolutely incredible to watch. You are right, Andre. Diego Pavia is him. There's no two ways about that. But let's get into how Vanderbilt won this game, because the biggest thing for me was just confidence down the stretch. There was never a moment where they changed their game plan. There was never a moment where they said, we got to run clock, we got to be able to run the ball, and then we'll punt it away and then hope our defense can make a stop. That never happened once, and Clark Lee and his offensive staff deserve a ton of credit for that, because it's very easy to get into that mode. You're up 5 points with about 2 minutes left, 2.5 minutes left. It's very easy to say, let's just run the clock, make them use their timeouts, and then we'll punt the ball away and we'll live with what happens. I can almost promise you they were losing that game if that's what happened. If Alabama was absolutely going to come down and score and win that game, Vanderbilt just never gave them the shot to do it. It was absolutely incredible to watch them go to work, and more than anything, to just say, yeah, we're going to get punched in the mouth a number of times throughout this game. We're going to keep responding, and we're not going to respond in any other way than we have been all year. It was awesome to watch, and really a huge amount of respect for that offensive staff over there, and then Diego Pavia, obviously. And then you took advantage of mistakes. Bama did not make a ton of mistakes in this game. This offense was pretty good, pretty much from start to finish. They even got Ryan Williams doing things that physically should not be possible for any human on planet Earth. But at the end of the day, you got 2 big mistakes, and you got 14 points out of them. Or 13 points, I guess. They missed the extra point, but absolutely huge for this team. And it was one of those things that totally changed the complexion of this game. It made you feel like maybe Vandy's got a little bit more of a shot here. Because if they were playing them straight up, let's just be totally honest, if Alabama made no mistakes in this game, Vanderbilt was probably not getting it done. But you had to force the mistakes, first of all, which they did a great job of. Got a huge fumble late in that game. And then you got to make the most of them. And man, did they do that. It was really incredible to watch. It was one of those things that every time they got on the field, you just felt like they were going to score. You felt like Diego Pavia was going to lead them down the field, and they were going to get a huge score to extend the lead once again. It was absolutely awesome to watch. And the final... Oh, excuse me. I apologize. Oh, the final thing I want to talk about is just responding, because that was something we talked about a lot in this breakdown, and by far the most impressive part, because this wasn't a game where Alabama made a million mistakes and handed the game to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt beat them wire to wire. They absolutely dominated on the line of scrimmage. They played incredibly good offensive football, and although their defense didn't play all that great for 60 minutes, they made the plays that they needed to make. And Bama got within 2 points twice in this football game. We're down 5 with the ball with a chance to go win the game. And Vanderbilt responded every single time. They got a fumble when they were down 5. They pretty much got a touchdown almost every single time that Bama got within 2 points. It was just every single time you felt like Vanderbilt was going to fall off the wayside. When you felt like Alabama was going to do the thing that they tend to do and come back in the fourth quarter, get a win, and move on with their day, Vanderbilt just kept responding. And this Alabama defense was a little bit all over the place, and there's a number of things to talk about with that, but I want to talk about just where you go from here. And I think for Alabama, I don't know. I really don't. This is something that just shouldn't happen, plain and simple. It should not happen at Alabama. It shouldn't happen regardless of how well Vanderbilt plays, which they played incredibly well. This should never happen, plain and simple. Now, I guess you just dust yourself off. You go play South Carolina this weekend and you see if you can bounce back. But the reality is this is a moment that Alabama fans have not felt in a very long time. And we're going to have to see how they respond to it. I know some are responding a lot better than some others, but at the end of the day, the coaches shoulder the most of the blame here. There's no two ways about that. When you have a team that looks that kind of shell-shocked. It wasn't even like a hangover thing, it felt like. It wasn't even that they felt like they got away with one and they weren't practicing very hard this week. It just looked like they showed up and were the worst team on that day. And that is unacceptable in its own right, but the reality is they're doing incredible things, and I think there's a number of things that could have been a wake-up call. The second half of last week should have been a wake-up call, but for whatever reason, it wasn't for this defense. They got absolutely worked today and did nothing that made you feel very confident in them going forward. That being said, there's plenty of talent on that team, so I'm not necessarily out on Alabama by any means, but there's some things that have to be fixed. And then finally, that Malachi Moore blow-up just can't happen. There's a million different things that happen that just can't happen on a football field for Alabama. That might be number one. You cannot have a player, especially a captain, out there essentially throwing a hissy fit and then yelling at you at the sidelines. That just cannot happen. We'll see how Kalen DeBoer handles it. I think he'll handle it fine. And frankly, I think Malachi Moore will see that video and immediately regret what he did. I think he's a great kid, but at the end of the day, something has to be done. There's no two ways about that. And then from the other side, who cares if you're Vanderbilt what you do from here? Who cares what happens tomorrow? Who cares what happens in a week? Who cares if you beat Kentucky in a bit? You just beat the number one team in the country. You just did something that had not been done and has not been dreamed of being done at your program in a very long time. So you can worry about all that other stuff later. Enjoy this one. No one really cares what happens in a couple weeks up there in Nashville, Tennessee right now. They care about what's happening right now. And frankly, I don't know if this changes too much about what Vanderbilt is in the SEC. Like, I don't know if they're going to make a title run or anything crazy like that. I know that they're getting everyone's best shot now. I can absolutely promise you that. There is not a team. Texas goes there later in the year. They are not going to walk in there the way Alabama did. I can absolutely promise you that. Now, Vanderbilt still has the ability to beat just about any team that walks in there, but I can promise you they're getting the best shot from pretty much everyone out there. Now, it was incredible to watch this. One of the worst programs in the country for so long now. They were 0-10 against number one teams. Now they're 1-10. They had 23 straight losses to Alabama. Not anymore. It was absolutely incredible. And Vanderbilt owned college football for a Saturday. I don't think that's ever happened before. I don't know when it will happen again, but it was really special to watch in the meantime. No two ways about that. I think it was absolutely incredible to watch. Whenever you have these moments in college football, it's never not special. It's never not cool watching all of these fans enjoy it. It's never not cool watching the goalposts go into a river. It's always special, and it shows you just what the sport is about. And man, it really confirmed to me that this sport isn't broken. It's messed up. There's no two ways about that. There's some things to be fixed, but when stuff like that happens, you get confirmed that it's a beautiful thing that absolutely is more than okay right about now. Yeah, I mean, I think, Anthony, I think there's an argument to be made that Alabama was a little bit hungover walking into this matchup. They definitely came out a little bit flat, let Vandy get that lead. I just think that's, I don't want to say discounting what Vandy did, but I think the reality is Vandy just outright beat them. I don't know if there's an ability to say Alabama handed them this game or anything like that. I think Vandy played a really good game. There was definitely a little bit of a hangover that played a part in it. There's no two ways about that. But at the end of the day, I do think a little of this was more Vanderbilt than it was Alabama at the end of the day. But, I think I tend to believe Texas will jump back up, or I guess Texas did jump back up to the number one spot. I think Ohio State is an interesting team because I might have them ranked number one, but I'll release my rankings tomorrow, so we'll figure out what I exactly have. But at the end of the day, incredible game, incredible atmosphere, incredible weekend, and we'll get to the rest of the craziness right after this, so stick with us.